Hmm. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, wherever you are. Good night, good morning, good afternoon. I am Professor Christopher McGlothlin, and this is The Ghost Show. Cost us 20 million euros right there. There you go. That's why we got to ask for extra on the Kickstarters. We got to pay that off to some shady characters. But
thank God for a poor exchange rate.
we try to talk them into some yen or something, but no, we were doomed from the start. Well, hello everybody. I am on my good days, Professor Christopher McGlothlin, and it is my sincere honor and pleasure and joy to be the creative pit boss of Goat Show Press, a small but mighty voice in the name of independent creators being allowed to create without fear of mistreatment or plagiarism or being ripped off, and being independent voices, independent original human voices in an increasingly AI and manufactured media culture. You may know me from such documentaries as The Exorcist Untold, and you may be familiar with our company from our previous books, Transgressive Horror, Subversive Sci-Fi, and Fantastic Flops. And you may also notice how they make a lovely 1, 2, 3 set, and that these are actual physical, real books that you can buy and that we have shipped out to actual human beings who have read them and enjoyed them. And our goal, ladies and gentlemen, here is that we would like to add a fourth one. So in the next Kickstarter, when I do this, it becomes even more comically hilarious as I handle an increasingly large number of hardcover books. So we would love to do a fourth one, and the fourth one is Transgressive Horror Resurrected. Yes, what would horror be without a sequel? And if you're interested in checking it out, there's your link. We would love it and appreciate it if you could pledge whatever you can, or if nothing else, just please share the link far and wide, because everybody knows at least one horror fan, and that is a person who I would guarantee will love what we do, because I am surrounded by some of the most talented writers in the world. If I had to do a resume at my age and list my skills, it's like I have incredibly talented friends. There you go. That's my number one thing that I have going for me. But let me introduce some of them, because they were kind enough to breach this crazy timey-wimey Doctor Who kind of thing that separates America from the rest of the world. I don't understand it, but I just push the buttons and they're here, and I'm glad. And I'm just going to go around the Brady Bunch grid here. And Colm, please introduce yourselves to the folks.
Hey, doing? I'm Colm Lundberg. For some reason, the Prof invited me back to book 4 for reasons I'll never understand. Glutton for punishment, I guess. Maybe he just likes editing. I'm Irish, in case you can't tell from the voice. Live in Kerry, games designer, writer, and all-around Warhammer 40k addict.
All right.
That's what we were just talking about before the show started.
And may again before the show is over. Matthew, say hello to the people, please.
Hello. My name is Matthew Dawkins. I am a writer and game designer. I have developed many games now for Onyx Path Publishing, and written for many more games for even more companies than that. The games that I write on that are probably most pertinent to this are the They Came From series of RPGs, which are all cinema genre tied in role-playing games, such as They Came From Beyond the Grave, which is horror influenced, and They Came From Beneath the Sea, which is sci-fi influenced. Like Colm, I'm back for number 4 because apparently I can't get enough of writing my vapid opinions about horror movies of dubious quality.
And in our final block, a man widely rumored to be challenging for the All Atlantic title at an upcoming pay-per-view event, my longtime friend Eddy Webb. Eddy, tell the folks about yourself.
Yes. Speaking of terrible quality, I've also been doing this is the 4th book now, and I think just the second or third time the three of us specifically have been on this podcast together. So that's fun. I like structure. But I've been a freelancer for slightly less long than Professor McGlothlin has. Right now, currently, I'm mainly employed by Onyx Path Publishing, although I have been doing some other stuff. Like recently, I've been working on Cyberpunk Red. I've working on the Gloomhaven role-playing game, stuff like that. But primarily, I am known for working on the Realms of Pugmire, which is a fantasy game where you play uplifted dogs in a future setting that is totally not sci-fi.
a game I'm honored to have several of my former pack members in. So yes, very very special place in my heart there. And wow, and then Matthew has been writing the games I always wanted to play back when I was a gamer, and Colm has made the single most addictive card game I have ever encountered. So yes, so even if my ridiculous hairstyle puts you off, I guarantee you I am surrounded here, literally surrounded here by very very talented people. And each of these gentlemen has contributed a fantastic essay about a particular film. So I'm just going to go back around the grid and give them a chance to talk about their movie and why it's well worth your time and effort to make a relatively small contribution and get to read some fabulous writing. So Colm, you're my leadoff guy. You want to tell us about your wonderfully, I didn't see that coming, but this is great pick of the 87 classic Angel Heart, which some of us remember as having taken a first date to.
Oh dear. I mean, that's a whole thing. Did you survive? Did you both survive? I mean,
yes, worked out better than the lady that I took to see Reanimator on a first date.
Yeah. Okay. Remind me if you ever ask me in a date. If you ever ask me in a date, remind me to say no. Just
tell us about Angel Heart.
Sure. So Angel Heart. I mean, I picked Angel Heart because it's not a film that I thought I would have enjoyed. I mean, just to give a bit of background, obviously it's written by William Schwartzberg's novel, who was a novelist I read. He wrote Fallen Angel. He wrote a second book called Nevermore, and they were okay. They were okay books. And of course, Parker was the director. Now, Parker has a soft spot in my heart because he did The Commitments as well, which is about a Dublin-based, a North Dublin-based film, music crew, basically, who formed this wonderful jazz band. And it was kind of quite an influential movie, music-wise, in my life. And that was in the early 90s. So Parker always has a soft spot, and of course he did Bugsy Malone and Fame, and he also did a movie about Pink Floyd and that kind of thing. So he's this weird kind of tapestry of I don't do horror, and Angel Heart was his first. I think he wanted to go down the Pokemon route of that. I have to direct them all, direct all the genres, but he never called Angel Heart a horror. Interestingly enough, he called it neo noir, he called it hard boiled, he called it a psychological thriller. Everyone else in the world calls it a horror, because it is. But it's so, I mean, again, it's a movie I didn't expect to enjoy, or possibly I shouldn't have enjoyed, because it's based on quite a weak script, novel wise. It's got a director who's not really good at horror. It's got a great cast: Mickey Rourke and Lisa Bonet, and cameo by the great Robert De Niro. But the director has chops, in fairness, even though he doesn't direct horror. But the plot is pretty weak, and it's linear. All movies obviously evolve in a kind of in a linear fashion, but the cartilage that connects the scenes in this is kind of quite weak. It's kind of quite staccato. It doesn't necessarily flow, so it's kind of a broken stage of scenes connected by a very weak kind of tendril of just about believable connectivity. But it got under my skin. When I watched it, it just got under my skin. And I mean, even from the outset, you're kind of looking at it and you kind of go, okay, he takes on this client called Louis Cypher. I mean, how does he not see that? He's supposed to be a private eye, you know? I mean, it's right there, dude. You even wrote it down. It's right in front of you. But so that you're kind of going, really, from the outset. But there's something about that movie, as I said, that got under my skin. And I never kind of quite put my finger on it. And I watched it again. I went, yeah, I really like this movie, even though it's not a great movie. I really kind of, it just gets me, and it took me a while to kind of get into the whole idea that what I was being presented with was this art piece, regardless of the content. And what I mean by that is the usage of color. Parker himself said he wanted to drain color from the movie, so everyone wears black. Everything's kind of done in a sepia tone. Everything's dulled down. Even when you move down to the south, it's all kind of dust and it's all kind of browns and muted beige. The only vibrant color in it is the red of blood. You know, so he creates this wonderful masterpiece of scene. Then the usage of sound. I mean, you're this really loud jazz music suddenly followed by silence. You know, when you know something bad is going to happen. There's not necessarily the creep up shock horror that you see. That you get in a lot of horror films and the big bang erupting sound. It's just this large sequence of kind of music and noise, and then silence, and then a dull background heartbeat that you're not really quite sure where it comes from in some scenes. The touches of brilliance in the little nuances in the film, which I have to confess took me kind of a while to pick up on. Like the character Johnny Favorite, the singer, was supposed to be madly world famous, and yet it took a lot of investigation to find out what he looked like and who he was, and so you're kind of going, hang on, did Lucifer brush over his fame in order to get partial revenge? Was he not really famous? Did the deal not work? So there's other kind of things that linger in the kind of question marks that linger, but it's a little subtle things like the elevators never go up; they always go down. The usage of heat throughout the movie, obviously, as he gets closer and closer to hell, it starts off quite cold. He's wrapped up in a coat, and if you watch the kind of the temperature gauge of the movie before he goes to Louisiana, it's just getting warmer and warmer. He goes to a beach on Long Island. There's people in there. There's a person in the t-shirt. Then it goes to New Orleans, and this famously this imagery of the fan throughout the entire thing, which starts kind of by the way, there's a rabbit hole of theories out there on the fans, like, oh, they only go counterclockwise. That means they're influenced by the devil. Or it could be he's signaling it's getting hotter because he's moving towards hell. Famously, De Niro fingernails as Lucifer get longer in every scene. And that's something that De Niro actually decided he wanted to do himself. And he was really excited in the second scene with Anna Parker and said, Did you notice my fingernails were 1/8 of an inch longer? And Parker, they're going, no, I didn't know. Apparently, he flew somebody in to do his nails. But obviously, as the movie goes on, it gets more. I mean, for such a cameo role, he really threw himself into it. I mean, there's that famous scene in the egg when he's rolling the egg and then equates the egg to a soul, and you can see the fingernails are longer in that. Even the cane he uses, he wanted to spend about $60,000 on cane. I mean, the whole movie was done for about $18 million, and it was a commercial flop because I think it only took in about 17 and a bit. But he went out to spend $60. So Parker argued him down to 6 canes, which only cost about $3,000. But he really wanted the role to be to look perfect. And in fairness, he's probably one of the best. It's one of the best portrayals of Lucifer. I've even it's only a cameo role. It's one of the best portrayals of Lucifer. So it was all this kind of art piece. It's kind of like getting a present in a box, and you're looking at the box, and the box is the most ornate, beautiful thing that you're not really worried about the content. You're just so focused on the artistry of the box that you're just blown away. And to me, in short, that's kind of what Angel Heart is. It's this beautiful package around a kind of a could have been better / weak storyline, but it's the package and the fact that it has these wonderful actors trying to portray the storyline. The 3 leads are amazing actors in their own right, and just creates this kind of this experience that just kind of gets under your skin in a way that, and it's not a horror I normally look for. I normally look for these, as you know, these kind of horrors, which is reality just kind of moves slightly sideways. So it's not really a horror type of horror film or film noir that I'd go for, but just the artistry of the creativity and the creation itself really gets under your skin.
Wow. Well, thank you. Well, there you go, folks. That's what our books are about. This is like going to the movies with cool people like that. If you don't have enough cool people in your life to go to the movies for, just pick up our books, and we'll be right there on the couch with you. And here we go. And now I want to talk to Matthew, who is I loved your Ishtar piece, but your ability to take films that I think a lot of people might say, what is there left to say about this film after all this time? And I can gleefully pick up one of my books and say, yeah, this is what's left to say about this film. And I have always marveled at your gifts to mine useful things out of extremely well-worked media properties. And your piece on Shivers, Colm's passion for Angel Heart totally comes through. Maybe want to see it again after all these many years. And my gosh, you made me want to watch a Cronenberg film, a decision one does not take lightly or after dinner.
I wouldn't recommend it before dinner either. I think the eye for detail comes from pedantry more than any kind of nested talent. And I should note that Ishtar does not appear in a transgressive horror book, though well it might. That's in Fantastic Flops, which is very fun. No, Shivers. I suppose a bit like Colm, I have I guess like any of us, a lot of the time, if you have a relationship with a movie, or you feel the need to write about a movie, it's often because you've seen it at an important time in your life, or you associate it with something else that was going on at the time. There's often a mood, a context around these things. And I can quite clearly remember when I was 14 or 15 years old, I think, so far too young really to watch Shivers, if there is an appropriate age to watch Shivers. There was a social club just down the road from where I lived, and all of the parents where I lived worked in the same place. It was a very small community. All the parents worked in the same place. All the accommodation was provided by that place, more or less. And so they would all go drinking in the same place on Fridays and Saturdays, and there was nowhere else to go. We were in the middle of the countryside, so all the teenagers would go to the same social club as well. That's how communities used to be, for better or worse. And the children would tend to go home earlier than the adults. We'd get in about 10:30, 11 o'clock. The adults would stay out drinking until midnight. That was apparently all absolutely fine. And what that resulted in for me was I would get home, I'd generally be by myself, and I would switch on the television, and I might have had a shandy or two, and I would watch whatever horror movie was on at the time in this very formative stage in my life. And this is how I first saw movies like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and in this case, Shivers. I remember, about the age of 14 or 15, turning the TV on, and invariably it was never at the very start of a movie. And I think the first shot I saw of Shivers was probably its most famous one of, is it Barbara Steele in the bathtub with the parasite crawling out from the plug hole and making its way up between her legs. And it was, of course, shocking. It was disturbing, and yet also captivating in that car crash way, appropriately for Cronenberg, that Cronenberg's movies so often are. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. I'd seen so many late night horror movies after coming back from this club, and this was the first time I had seen what would later become known as body horror. And given how early on in Cronenberg's oeuvre, if you like, Shivers is, it's one of his very first feature-length movies. The first, I think. It's honestly quite stunning in some ways how little has changed for Cronenberg. Because you have scenes of parasites wriggling around underneath someone's abdomen and being able to see the prosthetic abdomen, basically a piece of latex with some fingers underneath it, pushing upwards to make it look like there's worms living inside him. To see scenes where a parasite is passing from one person's orifice into another. I mean, this was pornographic in its horror. Oddly, not in a way that got picked up by the video nasty craze for some reason. Cronenberg somehow rose above that. I don't know whether his movies were seen as too artistic, less exploitative, which is bizarre that they might have been seen as not exploitative. But the premise of the movie, that there's, and Eddie, who has worked with me for a long time now, will know that this is my kind of movie, that the inhabitants of a luxury apartment complex just outside Montreal. And believe me, until I wrote this essay, Eddie, I had not even connected this because I hadn't read
basically High Rise again.
I told Eddie years ago that High Rise, J.G. Ballard's High Rise, was my favorite novel. I mean, I must have read it 16 or 17 years old, and it left a lasting impact. I love the idea of your reality changes and you change with the reality. And it kind of played into the political journey I was taking at the time, the sort of historical materialist view that I was dancing around with, that there's no such an individual can't change the world changes the individual. And little did I realize that I had already seen High Rise. I had already read High Rise more or less through Shivers, because the inhabitants of this luxury apartment complex just outside Montreal on a Canadian island find themselves subject to a mad scientist's parasitic, sexually transmitted infection that runs rampant throughout the tower block. And it's an apocalyptic vision. It's not a upbeat movie. It never gives you the impression that there's going to be a hero that comes out at the end of it who saves the day, because so little of it is actually shot outside of the high rise, well, the apartment complex, the Starliner suite or whatever it's called. There's no one with contacts with the army. You know, this isn't the Crazies or something like that where you think maybe it'll be bombed flat. No. This will begin here, it will end here. And
Canada, we're going to give the sanctions time to work.
And by the end of it, you've run through a very short, it's a svelte movie, I think it's fair to say. You run through this feature where the vast majority of the cast, if not all of the cast, by the end of it, have become infected, often in very grotesque ways, in frankly sexually provocative ways that and I know it's de rigueur these days to say you wouldn't get away with doing that now, but there's lots of, not only it's not even an implication, a hell of a lot of rape going on. There's a very memorable scene where a child is being approached in a sexually provocative way by a man with a crepe, and that sounds bizarre, but it's the way the waiter with his strawberry crepe points it towards her and just sort of squooges it, and the jam just oozes out the end of it as he's pointing it towards her. It is it's a sexual threat, but one that no other director would make. It's pure Cronenberg. And so you get to the end of the movie, and I will shut up in a minute. And what is remarkable for me, and as I was saying about J.G. Ballard's High Rise, and I mentioned in the essay the connections between the two, and again, I've only really realized how much of that setting has had such an impact on me that I've always attributed to Ballard, but it may well have gestated like a parasite with Cronenberg, is how by the end of it, the inhabitants of the Starliner suite of apartments, you can't feel bad for them. You can't think these are all poor victims, because they all seem perfectly content in their sexual zombification. Yes, they are going to be leaving the apartment complex. Yes, they're going to be spreading the parasites there. But this, in the same style of High Rise, is their world now. They have been changed by it, and they are perfectly happy. Well, at least we never see any kind of internal struggle, because it just doesn't happen. They just change. And so, yeah, they morph. And it's apocalyptic, but it's also philosophical in a way that I appreciate. Incredibly dystopian. But yeah, I would recommend it. But as Chris said at the very beginning, not on a full stomach.
Or an empty stomach.
Or an empty, yeah, just not on a stomach, unless you have parasites on your stomach.
Never eat again.
It is not the most grotesque Cronenberg movie. But given that with his latest Crimes of the Future, because he's got 2 Crimes of the Future, of course, but they're very different from each other, he is still playing with the idea that the body is clay, that that you can change, how far can you change a human before they're no longer human? It's amazing that he is still exploring these same themes via different paradigms each time. I think it's fantastic to look at, like a gallery of his work.
Yeah, we have to do the back cover art, well in advance of it. But I think if I had a do-over, I'd be very tempted to pull a line from your essay. Let me hit that trigger warning button again, and that would just be our back cover quote.
Yes, I've been responsible in my essay. I have said several times, stop reading if this is too much, because Cronenberg's an acquired taste.
Yeah, and it's so funny that he's still making vital films, because Saturday night my wife and I, it was our idea to go see the Zoe Kravitz film Blink Twice. And before anything else appears on the screen, you get 5 solid minutes of this movie has scary moments in it. Things will pop up and surprise you as you watch this film. and I'm like, okay. But now I have to go home and try to raise money for my book about David Cronenberg films.
See, I appreciate that. I don't think it ruins the plot of a movie to have something like that happen, but I think that there's a benefit to having a Cronenberg on the market where you almost don't need those kind of warnings, because that comes invested in his name.
Right. Cronenberg is the warning. That's the name.
Yeah, exactly. When it says a David Cronenberg movie, you think, oh, okay, right, I'll leave then.
You don't go to a lighthearted David Lynch film, same time.
No. I mean, that would be an interesting collaboration. I don't think David Lynch would be able to stomach him, and that's not to say David Lynch is in any way a cinematic coward. I think he's incredibly bold, but yeah, I think he would say, "What?" a lot. You want to do what with a parasite? He's not always Gordon Cole from Twin Peaks, but that's how I imagine every interaction.
Well, I do want to give Eddie a chance to talk about one of my favorite subjects, Mexican wrestling movies. But while David Lynch is in the conversation, I just have to throw out: is anybody else hoping that if we're ever able to peer into the multiverses, that we can finally see the universe where David Lynch got to make Return of the Jedi?
Oh God, that would be the end of the Star Wars franchise, probably.
George, he's a nice guy. He took me to a restaurant. They just served salads. He introduced me to a Wookiee. I'm happy that we didn't see his Star Wars. I'm happy we didn't see the Wooden Planet Alien 3. There's lots of ideas that look great on paper.
Was that even great on paper?
I mean, we were just talking about a Lynch Cronenberg collaboration here, so let's not lose track of what we're trying to create here. Hopefully, it never happens.
Who brings together John Waters?
John Waters and David Cronenberg would be a grotesque pairing, but it would be wonderful.
Yes. And now I go back to my dear old friend Eddy Webb, who our career arc has gone from on the same message board to now writing on books together. So
I know.
Here we go. We celebrate our amazing ride together, and here we go. We get to talk about one of our mutual passions, professional wrestling, and in particular, the Silver Mask Man himself, El Santo. Eddie.
Yes.
Talk to us about the Silver Mask Man.
So I admit, going from two very interesting introspections on how the genre of horror can be evolve and change and bring depth to a luchador punching mummies is a bit of a tonal shift in this conversation. But I've always been fascinated by these movies kind of in an abstract way. Like I think I saw like one or two, maybe like just in reruns on network television or something, and I knew they existed. But a couple of years ago, I started doing a pretty deep dive into them because a couple of Blu-ray sets came out from different companies, but roughly at the same time. And most of them, so like 10 different El Santo films kind of came out at the same time. 2 of them were very old black and white films. His very first appearances came out this beautiful, I think it was BFI did it, a beautiful box set, slipcover and 9 yards. And then another company did English dubs of 8 more of El Santo's films. And so I kind of got down. Yes, that one. That's Edry Santo. Actually, that's the one I was talking about. It's a great DVD set.
Yes.
But both of them also had documentaries. Got me really interested in kind of Mexican cinema, as well as my own separate interests in lucha libre specifically, and how they're kind of irreducible from Mexican culture. And so when I pitched this, because I mean the idea is transgressive. Really, the El Santo movies are extremely transgressive because they were its own genre. I mean, we talk about luchador films, especially in English-speaking countries, a little dismissively, but that really is kind of the genre, because the genre is El Santo is in it and is the lead. But that could be a spy film one time. That could be a sci-fi film one time. That could be a horror film. And around the time of the 70s, we get into Santo en la Venganza de la Momia. They're kind of all of these at once. And it really just becomes its own blending of things. Horror is kind of the base of the movie, in the sense that ultimately the high plot of the movie is El Santo and a bunch of archaeologists go out to this area where they've uncovered a mummy's corpse. The mummy comes to life, and they have to try to escape with their lives. And ultimately, El Santo defeats it, and they go home safe. That's kind of pretty straightforward horror plot. So it's ultimately a horror film in that regard. But it's also an intrigue film. It's also a comedy. It's also a romance. It's also just has 2 wrestling matches bookending it. And even that is fascinating, because like it was illegal at this time to broadcast wrestling on Mexican television, because it was considered to be it was corrupting the youth. And so a lot of ways that people could even see an El Santo match, if they didn't go live to see him, would be to go to these movies. So this was their way of watching like WWE Raw or whatever, was they would go to an El Santo movie and watch his matches there. So it's also a sports documentary crammed into a horror film, which is also trying to be a comedy and a romance. And the most bizarre thing about all of this is that it all kind of works, right? If you buy into the conceit that El Santo is simultaneously the wrestler, the actor, and the character all at once, and is seamlessly moving between these 3 narrative layers throughout all of his films, and everything just hinges around the fact that everyone in all of these films just accepts that El Santo is this irreducible force, then the whole film becomes this amazing kind of meta melange of genres that just hang together on El Santo's intense charisma and physical prowess. It's fantastic.
Like, if you go see a Marvel movie today, there's that obligatory scene where it's like, "Oh, I'm the Hulk now." Well, that happened.
Right.
And the great thing about these Santo movies is like this mass Mexican wrestler just immediately gets the cooperation of the Mexican government. He can walk into cocktail parties like, "Oh, hey, El Santo." And it's just, you either go along with this reality or you don't. They're going somewhere fun, and you can take the trip or not. But they're doing their thing. You're so right. That is one of the great things about this, the whole series.
And the one thing that I've since learned, which makes it even better, is that that's also how real life was for El Santo, right? He would walk around Mexico, and he would get invited into restaurants and get seats. He would be given free tickets to stuff. He would be given the key to the city frequently. El Santo could just do whatever the fuck he wanted to, no matter where he went. So the movies are pretty close to his real life, honestly. So again, there's this weird meta thing. And on top of all of this, there's a comic book of El Santo that's being put out. And they're not drawn. They're photos of El Santo doing superhero stuff. Like on a weekly basis, these comics are coming out. So El Santo is very much a cultural icon of Mexico, and so like the archetypal image that we have of the lucha wrestler, the silver mask, very much comes from El Santo, comes from his films being shown in the southern United States and other Spanish-speaking countries throughout the world, and eventually slowly getting an audience even outside of Spanish-speaking audiences. So it is just this massive phenomenon that a lot of English-speaking countries simply don't know about. It's amazing that something has this worldwide impact and this huge cultural footprint, and also is completely unknown in other parts of the world. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. It is, if you can suspend your disbelief just enough to buy into, oh, so the wrestler made a time machine in his spare time and nobody's questioning this. They will take you on some amazing rides with so much goodness in them.
Yeah, and I mean, to mildly spoil the plot of this movie, it does a really fantastic job of. We're talking a little bit about kind of cinematography, specifically in other films we mentioned. This one's very similar because the whole thing is shot like a late 60s, early 70s monster film. That's for a family-friendly monster film. Everything in how the cinematography is done, how the characters react, is like this is a horror film with a little bit of comedy injected in, something you would take your kids to see, get them a little bit scared.
Oh yeah.
And then at the end, you find out the mummy is not supernatural at all. It's a guy in a suit, which is so amazing because even if you're going, wow, this guy looks, it's a great bit of costume. It looks like a guy in a suit. I have to pretend like it's not a guy in a suit. And the twist is, no, it's actually a guy in a suit. It's just fantastic meta.
Yes, absolutely. And if you're new to all this and you're hearing all this and you're thinking these guys hit a lot of bases, yes, by design.
Yes.
Absolutely by design. We definitely have that philosophy. If this is not your kind of movie, here's another 43. Knock yourself out. And if you've seen our list of movies and you're thinking that's one shy of perfection, we have higher level backers, and you can pledge and you earn the right to tell us what movie to write about, and we will add whatever movie you want us to add. And you could also pledge a little extra, and then you could join us here on the Brady Bunch grid and talk to the creators of your choice. We always love to have our backers on here to chat about whatever they want to chat about. So thank you. So thank you all who are tuning in for your support. And we do have a virtual mob watching this show. So thank you guys for bringing your star power to this show. All righty. Well, so I know that we are all very cinema curious, and we're all the time looking for new and exciting things to watch, even if we don't necessarily writing about them at the moment. But Colm, have you seen anything interesting streamed, gone to the theater, seen anything that really struck you cinema wise lately?
There's an issue with the cinemas in the area that I'm from, and just very briefly, it's a weird societal thing that I don't understand. So during the trailers, the thing for everyone's really quiet. Then the movies start, and people started having full-blown conversations.
Oh man!
Or take out their phones. It's just a weird cultural phenomenon in this particular small area of where I live that this happens. It's not anywhere else that I've experienced this. So I tend to be very careful and not go to the cinema as much as maybe I used to when I lived elsewhere.
Seriously.
But, yeah, I know, but thankfully, with streaming and with all the kind of services and all the kind of stuff and flat screen TVs and cinema surround sound and all the kind of stuff, you don't need to go to a place to actually enjoy a thing. I'll tell you one thing that when you asked that question, it popped into my mind, and it's probably because the original source material means so much to me, are the Dune films. Controversial.
Oh, wow.
No, the Dune films. So I mean, I've read the Dune books and I enjoy the Dune books, and I like the idea of a sci-fi epic where no one's the good guy, and obviously the correlations to my own personal interest in the different religions of the world and why people believe in what they believe in, and all that corresponds and has an influence in that. And of course, as Matthew was saying earlier on, it's the time that your life that you encounter these things that embed them in a particular importance, or embed them in a particular way in your brain, in the evolution of your brain. So Dune is a very seminal piece of work to me, and I very much enjoyed the sci-fi series, the sci-fi channel put out. I thought yeah, you guys got this, you understood it, you got the breadth of it, you got the core of it. And when the Dune movies came out, I was kind of going, yeah, they're pretty. Whereas the star-studded, and yeah, okay, the flavor is right, and it's like not to go back to, but it's like kind of an RPG that you kind of go, this world is a great setting, it's a brilliant setting, it's beautiful, and then they come up with here's a book of pretty artwork, and going, that's great, but where's the content? I need the content to run the game, and I think that's what these movies have done. They've painted a beautiful picture. And actually, now that I think about it, in a very different way than Angel Heart does, because Angel Heart does it as part of the cinematography experience. These guys just could have just put up a series of stills, and you go, yeah, that's nice, that's another nice still, that's a really nice still. But it just fell. I feel personally, it fell way short of granted a mark that's very difficult to reach in the cinematic portrayal of any epic fantasy or epic. I mean, Peter Jackson did obviously Lord of the Rings, and just about scratched the surface of what the potential was, although I personally believe he did a very good job. But yeah, no, the Dune movies, I can't say I'm disappointed in them because they're pretty, but it's like the content wasn't part of the cinematic experience for me,
So, Dune thoughts, gentlemen?
I thought they were well, epic is maybe a lazy word, but I think it's accurate. They felt appropriate for the novel. I don't think you could really capture the spirit of the novel quite so effectively on screen as Denis Villeneuve's Dune. I mean, it in contrast, it highlights, as if we needed to be made more aware, the vast number of flaws in David Lynch's Dune. Though I don't think he was ever truly comfortable with the project. No. I don't think I could look at Denis Villeneuve's Dune and say there was a bad performance, there was a bad shot, there was a bad use of sound. I would hesitate to say it's a perfect movie or perfect pair of movies, but I think for what they intend to do, they are about as good as you're going to see. It's not going to be for everyone, because it requires concentration, it requires commitment, and it also requires investing in a world of Hurgle-Flurgles, Banoffins, and Finagle beans, which makes it more technical than a Star Wars, let's say.
Right.
But I think, they were fantastic. They are just incredibly strong movies.
See, Eddie, Dune thoughts?
I'm with Colm in the sense that I'm genuinely surprised that somebody else in the world actually liked the sci-fi film series like I did. Because I mean, yes, there's parts where you can clearly see the desert scenes are set in a room because you can see the corner of the room where they're filming in the open desert sets. Yes, there's obvious limitations in it, but for me, like I think the Dune movies, there's something that's missing, and I think the problem was actually, to Matthew's point, like you can't really point to anything as wrong, but also there's no edges to it. There's nothing to kind of grip teeth. Like, yes, the Lynch film's horribly flawed, but you remember it, right? The sci-fi version had issues, but it's memorable. It sticks out. It sticks in your head. And these films are perfectly competently executed, and then they fall right out of my head.
I think they're the sci-fi equivalent of Lawrence of Arabia.
Which also falls out of my head. But
and that's fine. That is of course fine. But I would struggle to find a fault myself.
That's fine. That's cool. It's
interesting,
cool.
yeah.
We can have different opinions, even if yours is wrong.
Absolutely, and
Yes.
just talk about each, and then just bitch about the other person behind his back or her back. That's how this works, right?
I don't care.
That's really interesting. It's really interesting to hear what you're saying there about Matthew as well, because it's great to kind of get I mean, you're right. I mean, cinematically, it's and as I said, Eddie, cinematically, it's quite accomplished. I think maybe for me, it lacks that soul that, as Eddie said, that drags you in and gets you. And just kind of
I don't
anchors
think
you.
I'd be interested in watching them at home. I think they are perfect cinema experiences. I don't. It's a bit like Interstellar. I saw Interstellar in the cinema maybe 3 times, and I've never had an interest in watching it at home. I once saw that it was available to watch in flight, and I thought, God, imagine watching Interstellar on the back of a seat.
Wow.
It felt offensive to contemplate it.
That's actually very fair.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. All right. So Colm, great bringing. Matthew, what's sparked your curiosity, your fascination on the screen lately?
So I guess I've seen a couple of things that really struck me. One was a rewatch of Censor by Prano Bailey Bond, which is a horror movie. I think 2021, I think it came out, and I saw it in the cinema when it came out. I've only just seen it on TV, and conversely, it's a movie I enjoyed more on the TV. I loved it in the cinema, but I really appreciated it on TV. It is a movie about someone who works for the British Board of Film Classification, or the movie censors, in the 1970s, in the era of the video nasties.
Oh, wow.
And in watching one of these exploitation movies, she sees someone she believes is her missing sister getting potentially what could be in a snuff film. She doesn't know. It might be a horror movie, it might be a snuff movie. And she starts following this very winding, grisly path that could go a bit hostile, could go a bit Serbian film, but it doesn't, thank goodness. It ends up being a nice marriage between the gristle and, I guess, handheld nature, shall we say, of 1970s horror, next to what modern audiences like out of their quiet bang jump scare movies. It doesn't lean on jump scares, but I guess I could compare it. It's almost a matchup of something like Driller Killer with Hereditary, or the Texas Chainsaw Massacre with a Mike Flanagan movie. It's kind of merges those together, and I very much recommend it. But the other one is Romulus, the new Alien movie.
Oh, yeah.
Because I can't get away from parasites.
There are medications to help you with that, Matthew.
Well, why would I reject my new reality? David Cronenberg said that Dan O'Bannon stole his idea. I think he may have been saying it tongue in cheek, but because Shivers came out before Alien, he said the whole chest-bursting parasite thing ingested through the mouth was his idea first. And I really enjoyed Romulus. I don't think it's that fashionable to say it. I know there's a lot of callbacks, and I think they are the worst part of it. But I think I like to think, if I was, for some godforsaken reason, if this was my first Alien movie, I think I would be able to love it completely at face value. Oddly, I think that having the knowledge of all of the prior ones, it almost acts as a bit of an anchor. I won't spoil it because it's a new movie, but the necromancy of an actor, I know it's been done with approval, but it was utterly unnecessary. It added nothing other than Easter egg member berries. And there were several of those. But conversely, as I say, there are moments in it that are callbacks that, for me, almost redeem or provide a new perspective on flaws in the previous Alien movies, like Prometheus, like Covenant, like Alien Resurrection. I mean, there is a birthing scene in Romulus. Again, no spoilers here. One of Resurrection's biggest complaints was that abomination that Ripley gives birth to, this sort of alien-human hybrid thing, which really doesn't work in Alien Resurrection. It's not a good plot beat. You get a similar kind of thing in Romulus. And for me, the guy in front of me walking out of the cinema said the last 10 minutes of that movie were shit. But I thought the last 10 minutes of this movie were fantastic. I loved it. It really delivered where Resurrection fell off a cliff for me. So, which is maybe faint praise, I don't know. But I really enjoyed Romulus. I thought incredibly good set design, really good shooting. Didn't care too much about the characters, but that's fine. It's a slasher movie in space. It visually striking and smart. And I would definitely watch it again. I thought it was a lot of fun.
It's so funny you're talking about 70s British cinema, because I'm doing Frankenstein and the Monster from Hell for Transgressive Horror Resurrected. So I've had to do this deep dive into 70s era horror where poor Michael Carreras is trying to keep the lights on, and he's trying to ramp up the gore and the sex, and he's dealing with Hammer's eternal foe, John Trevelyan, the head of the British censors. Yeah. And I watched this neat little documentary about Michael's right-hand person, Ada Young. And apparently Ada Young single-handedly got all of the gorier, sexier 70s Hammers films out to the public, because apparently Ada Young would sit during the screenings and she would hold John Trevelyan's hand, and whenever he would react to something, she would pat his hand and go, "It's all right, John. It's not that bad." And he would pass it right through.
Wow. It's ridiculous. Wow. You can actually find the list online of the books that got banned the movies that got banned in the UK. And it's a stupid list. I mean, there is no consistency to it. There's some movies which you kind of expect based on reputation. Texas Chainsaw Massacre is the most famous one. And I think Maniac is on there, maybe Andrilla Killer. Some of the exploitation horror movies that got a big reputation for the time, but got greater reputations because they were banned. But there's other stuff on there that is just bizarre. Some of the sci-fi movies that got banned, real obscure, what would 10 years later be straight to VHS trash. No one would have cared. But yeah, there we are.
All right. Well, as an American, I think I'm still allowed to go, "Fuck you, Mary Whitehouse." So there we go.
Oh yeah. I think she warrants that.
Yes, I come by my obscure British references honestly.
I don't remember Avon ever saying "fuck you, Mary Whitehouse" in Blake 7.
That was cut. Cut.
He would say "fuck you."
Actually, since we're digressing here, I don't know if you saw there's going to be a Blu-ray set of Blake 7 coming out.
A Region B one, but I'm still so happy. I saw the trailer for it, and they had the scene where I now that I need them, but the actress who played Callie and the actress who played Jenna playing with the original props and running around somebody's backyard going zzz, zzz, zzz. I may have to just buy a region free player just for this.
Well, the awesome reason I'm bringing it up is because they are going to add some enhanced special effects, but they're not going to use CGI. They're actually going to do model shots. So they're actually going to do model shots for the various different ships and whatnot. New for these episodes.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like the remasters of Red Dwarf.
Yeah.
And the great thing about doing these shows is I look at our viewer numbers and I can just tell everybody watching this is just as excited about a Blake 7 Blu-ray release as we are. Right. We are with our people. and Eddie, okay, before we say goodbye, I want to give you a chance, sir. What have you seen at the cinema that has sparked your imagination lately?
Well, since Matthew mentioned exploitation, I actually have been watching. My friend Chris Byview, we do a podcast called Genreless, where we actually talk about this kind of stuff, only it's television and movies. And on his Patreon, he's been walking me through some prominent black cinema. And so we've gotten to Shaft. And
yes.
I remember watching Shaft, but it was so long ago that it was basically watching the movie fresh again. And I mean, yes, there's a reason why it's in the Criterion Collection. It's a fantastic piece of outsider cinema, but also it's just a really good, solid movie. Because before I watched it again, I did a little bit of research and I saw the one of the original posters that said "cooler than James Bond," and so it stuck in my head. And I'm watching Shaft, going, "Oh my God, this really is a black James Bond movie, right?" It's the James Bond movie that they would never allow to make in the 70s. Because I then from there watched a Roger Moore film, and it's like, yeah, it really is a James Bond film. But also with the DVD I got, it came with a behind the scenes thing shot at that time. And so there's a lot of work with the director of the movie and him talking about working with Isaac Hayes on the score, working with Roundtree in some of the scenes, and just his thoughts on what needs to happen, and him talking about, like, this is how I need you to play it, this is how I need it to go, this is the kind of people expect to see it. It was a really exciting look into the thought process of a director and who's making something that clearly in his head he knew this is going to be an amazing film. And it has since borne out. I mean, Shaft is a household name now. Turns out not because of the novels. The novels are terrible, but the movie was just genuinely wonderful. So it was neat to see, kind of from a fresh perspective, such a well-regarded film, and then also kind of get a little bit into how it was made and why it was made, from a perspective it's not my own. I don't have that lived experience, but then also being able to talk to someone who does have that lived experience and what it meant to him was really, really cool too.
Shout out to the director, Gordon Parks, one of the greatest photographers who ever lived before he had the opportunity to make that film. So definitely multi-talent artist that people should know more about.
Yeah, and I mean, people talk about how the best films are basically every frame is a picture, and that film it genuinely is, right? It's like there's some genuinely amazing shots of New York in 1970s in there that they're just that you're right. Gordon Parks absolutely knew what he was doing.
My dear friend Rob Toth, who is a longtime New Yorker, says you can always tell the perfect New York film when you watch it and you can smell the garbage strike.
Yeah,
and that one definitely puts you down in the classic porno theater on every block, New York. Yep. Every 70s film fan, I think it's kind of our spiritual home in a way.
Yes.
All right, so we're coming up on when the band starts to play us off here. So Colm, is there anything you're working on that you want to tell the people about? If they want to check out some of your other stuff?
A lot of the projects I have are kind of longer term at the moment. I think they're probably drifting into next year. But there's a couple of major games in development, which hopefully, as I said, will be released next year. I can't really talk about. But at the moment, I'm available for work. Other work in the interim. I'm actually working on my own novel as well, which I'm hesitant to talk about because that'll take up about 3 or 4 hours.
And a more talented fellow or a greater joy to work with you could not find. And I say that as his publisher and editor. All right, Matthew, will there be some more theys coming from various sources, or are you working on some surprise stuff?
Well, the latest they came from the RPG anthology, which has something like 12 different genre pieces in.
Wow.
Everything from murder mystery, dark house cinema to superheroes and period costume dramas and all kinds of things. We go all out on that one. They came from the RPG anthology. I very much recommend people check it out. You can still pre-order it. And the other one is working with my good friend and colleague Larry Blameyer, who directed various movies we all like Lost Skeleton of Cadavra and Trail of the Screaming
his thoughts on The Seventh Victim in our first transgressive horror.
Yeah.
His property Steam Wars, for which he's published a graphic novel. Eddie and I are co-developing the tabletop role-playing game of Trinity Continuum Steam Wars. Larry writing on it, and drawing it. It is a hell of a lot of fun. So do keep your eyes open for that if you like all things Larry.
Indeed.
Yes. The first guy ever to direct me on screen.
Really?
Oh wow.
Yes. I had a particularly good fortune year, so I backed one of his Kickstarters at a level where I get to do some voice acting on one of his shorts.
Mm-hmm.
And
Oh, cool.
the other half of my IMDb page is that I am in Tales of the Moist Apostrophe. And I'd say as long as what a great thrill, and seriously, as long as I live, I will always owe Larry Lemire for allowing me to speak the line, semicolon is just a comma and a period at making whoopee. I kind of want that on my tombstone right now. I'm sorry.
Right.
Enough about me. Eddie, what are you up to these days, my friend?
As always, I've been working on my creator-owned game, Realms of Pugmire. Um, it's basically, like I said earlier, it's a fantasy game where everyone's playing uplifted dogs in an Earth that has been abandoned by humanity. So it's a sci-fi game that thinks it's a fantasy game. We just kickstarted the second edition early last year, and as of like a week ago, the layout has been finalized. About to go to indexing soon, so it should be available soon. So that's really exciting. But for horror fans, since you're watching this, something I want to talk about is next month, Onyx Path putting out a game that both Matthew and I have worked on along with Daniel Lazan and a whole bunch of other people called Curseborn, Borne. And that is about a modern day urban fantasy horror game where you are playing people who have inherited this horrible curse, and you're trying to figure out what to do with your lives and your families who are kind of full of jerks. But you have found some power as a vampire or a werewolf or a ghost or a demon or whatever, and maybe try to take some power back from the families that are trying to oppress you. So if you want more information on that, that is curseborn.com, Curseborne.
Ooh. Well, thank you so much for being my guests here. Thank you all for tuning in. These incredibly talented gentlemen, they're even it may be possible they're even more fun in print. And if you would like to keep these conversations going and keep reading their words, and for us to be funny and insightful and irreverent and hopefully guiding you toward better films, and you would like to see me ridiculously buried in these hardcover books, please go to the link. Please pledge what you can, or if nothing else, please spread the word far and wide. We are I think we are still a biscuit shy of 5,000 here, which is a tremendous start, the best start we've ever had on one of these. But we sure could use your help to get us over the finish line to make number 4 happen, and of course number 5. So yes, because what would horror be without talking about the sequel, right?
Right.
All right. Well. All right, so it's time for us to do our equivalent of the end, which turns into the bloody question mark. Speaking of which, just real quickly, I will be on another podcast. I'll be on the Blasters and Blades podcast. Let me drop that into the chat here. This Sunday at 9 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, where the lovely folks who run that podcast will be giving me a chance to talk about the book on their home terms. And this show will return on the following Sunday, which I do believe would be quick calendar check here. Sorry, I should probably plan these shows out better. Okay, all right, come on now. All right, come on. Yeah, that'll be Sunday the 8th at 8 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We will be having our kind of final countdown show as we brace for the last 72 hours of the show. So please turn in to see either the happiest guy on earth or me having a Howard Beale and network level breakdown live on YouTube. Either way, you won't want to miss it. But until then, thank you all very much for turning in. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me and for making Ghost Show happen. And we'll see you next time on the Ghost Show.
Bye.